They told you freedom would come at 65, that if you worked hard, stayed loyal, and kept climbing the ladder for 4 decades, one day you'd be free. Free to travel, to relax, to finally live. Retirement was painted as the promised land, the reward at the end of a long, obedient life. But what if that promise was never real? What if it was a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep you moving, producing, complying, without ever questioning the cost? For most of your life, the script has been clear. Study hard, get a job, work for 40 years, retire. That's the plan. That's the path. And most people follow it without ever asking who wrote it in the first place. But the truth, waiting at the end of that path, is far from liberating. According to a 2020 study by the Stanford Center on Longevity, more than 2/3 of retirees in the U.S. feel disoriented within the first 18 months of retirement, and not because they've run out of money, but because they've run out of identity. Suddenly, they wake up in a world where their role, their purpose, their very sense of being has disappeared. You see, the system never prepared them for freedom. It prepared them to function. It trained them to operate within a machine, not to live beyond it. Retirement is not the grand reward it was promised to be. It's the quiet exit from the stage, the moment the role ends, the lights go out, and no one tells you what to do next. And that's where the existential crisis begins. Because what do you do when you've spent your entire life playing a role, and then that role vanishes? Who are you without your job title, your emails, your deadlines, the meetings that once made you feel important? For decades, your worth was measured by productivity, not presence. And now that the system no longer needs you, you're expected to know how to enjoy life without ever having been taught how. Retirement was never about freedom. It was about the moment you stopped being useful. It was never designed to help you explore your inner self or reconnect with what truly matters. It was designed to gently remove you from the machine while convincing you it was a gift. That's the brilliance of the lie. It doesn't sound cruel, it sounds like a reward. But Alan Watts said it best. You are under no obligation to be the person you were told to be. That single phrase dismantles the entire foundation of the retirement myth. Because if you were never meant to follow someone else's script, then maybe retirement isn't the end of a chapter, but the moment you realize the book was never yours. And that realization hurts, because it forces you to confront a deeper question. What does it mean to be free if you've spent your whole life waiting for permission to live? Have you even lived at all? We are taught to delay everything, joy, rest, discovery, reflection, as if life truly begins only when work ends. But life doesn't wait. It doesn't start at 65. It's been happening the whole time, and most people are too busy preparing to live to actually notice. So maybe the real lie isn't just about retirement. Maybe the lie is that you ever needed to wait for freedom. Perhaps freedom was never a destination, but a way of being, one you could have chosen at any moment, but no one ever told you. Because a free person cannot be controlled. A free person doesn't need the script. A free person sees retirement not as a reward, but as a reminder that we traded our days for a promise that was never real. And now we're left wondering what life could have been if we had simply started living it sooner. If freedom was never the true goal, then what was? To understand that, we need to take a step back and look at the structure. The machine that shaped your life before you even knew it. Because what most of us call normal is not natural at all. It's a system, one built not to empower individuals, but to standardize them. Starting in the 20th century, human life was quietly industrialized. Not just work, life itself. It was broken down into predictable stages: education, employment, retirement, death. From the moment you're born, the path is already laid out. Go to school, get good grades, learn to sit still and follow instructions, then pick a career, punch in, punch out, repeat for 40 years. And if you're lucky, you get a few quiet years before your time runs out. But here's what they never told you. Retirement wasn't created for your benefit. It was created to manage productivity. The concept dates back to 1889, when German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck introduced it not as a gift for workers, but as a way to remove older people from the workforce and make space for younger, more efficient labor. Retirement was an economic policy disguised as compassion. And over time, we accepted it as truth. The system never asked what kind of life you wanted. It asked what kind of worker you could become. And slowly, quietly, it began to define your value by how well you could serve its needs. You weren't encouraged to ask why you were working, only how hard. You weren't taught to question the routine, only to optimize your efficiency within it. A 2007 publication from the American Psychological Association titled "The Retiring Mind" put it plainly. Modern humans have never designed their own lives. They merely follow scripts written by others. And when you really think about it, isn't that what most of us do? We inherit a template. We follow the model. We spend our most vital years working often more than 47 hours per week. And we never stop to ask, what am I working for? Who does this really serve? This is the deepest lie, that your life belongs to you, when in reality, it's been programmed, scripted, and monetized from the very beginning. The education system trains you for work. The labor system demands your time. And the retirement system quietly discards you when your utility begins to fade. The entire structure is designed for maximum output, not for your personal fulfillment. And yet most people never challenge it, not because they agree, but because they've never seen another option. When a machine is all you've ever known, silence starts to feel like peace. But it's not peace. It's numbness. You're not free. You've just stopped questioning. The tragedy is that most people don't realize they're inside a machine until it's too late, until the noise stops, and they sit in the silence, wondering where all the time went. Because when your life is built around schedules, deadlines, productivity metrics, and future goals, you lose touch with the present moment, with your inner compass, with what it means to live a life that you chose. You weren't born to be a cog in a machine. You were born to experience life, to feel deeply, to create, to connect, to explore. But a system that feeds on control has no room for that kind of freedom. So it sells you a version of life that feels safe, structured, respectable, and drains your soul in the process. And that's the real question modern society never wants you to ask. What if the life I've been living isn't really mine? Once you begin to see the machine for what it is, another truth becomes painfully clear. The system didn't just take your time, it shaped your identity. It taught you to see yourself not as a being, but as a function. You were a teacher, a manager, a doctor, an engineer, and for most of your life, that role defined who you were, until one day it ends, and with it, so does your sense of self. This is what no one prepares you to face. When the meetings stop, the titles vanish, and the calendar goes blank. On the surface, you're supposed to feel free, but instead, many feel lost. Not because they miss the work, but because they lose themselves. They no longer know who they are without the role. The identity they spent decades building suddenly disappears. According to the National Institute on Aging, depression rates increase by over 40% during the first year of retirement. And it's not because people lack money, comfort, or time. It's because they're forced to answer a question they never asked before. If I'm no longer working, then who am I? This is the crisis hiding beneath the surface, one no financial advisor can prepare you for. It's not about income, it's about identity. And when that identity was built around a function, its collapse feels like a silent death. A death that happens while you're still breathing, still here, but no longer knowing who's inside. There's a Reddit post from a man named John, 64, recently retired from Boeing after a lifetime as an engineer. He wrote, "I realized I'd never actually lived. I just worked. And now that the work is over, I have no idea what to do." His words are raw, honest, and painfully common. Because John's story isn't unique. It's a mirror for countless lives. Lives where identity and profession became one and the same, until there was no separation between the man and the work. For years, we're told to strive, to climb, to produce. But no one teaches us how to simply exist. So when the striving ends, the silence is deafening. And in that silence, you feel the weight of everything you postponed, the curiosity you never followed, the passions you buried, the parts of you that didn't fit the role. So you left them behind. And that's the illusion, the idea that your worth lies in being useful, that value equals function. But as Alan Watts once said, "You are not a role, you are the very play of life itself." You were never meant to be just one thing. Life was never a single job title carried to the grave. But it takes courage to face the void that opens when the role ends. Because that void isn't empty. It's full of questions. Questions you were too busy to ask when the calendar ruled your life. What do I love? What moves me? What do I believe beyond what I was told to believe? These are the questions that mark the beginning of real freedom, but they require the death of the old identity, the dismantling of the mask, the letting go of the function, the birth of a self that was hidden beneath the role. And maybe that's why the system never wanted you to stop. Because in silence, you remember who you were before the mask. And that memory, that spark, is the beginning of something the machine can't control, a self that is free, not because it retired from work, but because it awakened to life. But even when the role ends, the machine doesn't let you go. It just gives you a new one. This time, not as a worker, but as a consumer. You don't retire from the system. You retire into another system, one designed to profit from the years you have left. The moment you step out of your career, you enter the sights of a trillion-dollar industry, the business of retired freedom. It's a seductive illusion, one that sells you peace, leisure, fulfillment, all carefully packaged in cruise brochures, real estate promises, financial plans, and insurance portfolios. They tell you this is your time to enjoy life, to travel the world, to finally live. But here's the trick. It's not freedom they're offering. It's a product. And the product isn't the trip, the condo, or the lifestyle. The product is you. Or more precisely, your desire to feel in control after decades of being controlled. They sell you comfort because they know you fear chaos. They sell you plans because they know you've never lived without one. So instead of encouraging inner freedom, they offer outer order, a new routine of spending, managing, maintaining, a continuation of the structure disguised as liberation. And so, retirement becomes a market, not a milestone, a demographic, not a discovery. You are not free. You are simply being gently reabsorbed into a more mature corner of the same machine. And the most convincing part of the lie is that it sounds reasonable, practical, even responsible. They tell you to meet with financial advisors, to plan your portfolio to maximize your retirement years. But few stop to ask, who really benefits from these plans? Who profits from your compliance? The uncomfortable truth is that most financial advice is not neutral. It's an industry, and industries have interests. The very institutions urging you to secure your retirement are the ones charging commissions, fees, and interest on the very plans they recommend. Your freedom has a price tag, and they're the ones collecting. They make you believe that safety equals freedom, that the more protected, insured, and prepared you are, the freer you'll feel. But Alan Watts exposed the trap. The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing. To hold your breath is to lose it. The more you chase stability, the more fragile you become. Because true freedom is not a well-managed retirement account. It's not an oceanfront condo or a senior discount on a Mediterranean cruise. It's not comfort wrapped in fear. It's the ability to see through the illusion, to recognize that most of what you've been sold as freedom is just another layer of control. That doesn't mean there's no value in rest, in travel, or in planning your finances. It means those things only carry true meaning when they come from intention, not from programming. If your retirement is just another script, another checklist of things you should do, then you haven't escaped the system at all. You've just changed costumes. The real tragedy isn't that people want to enjoy life after working. It's that they were never taught how to enjoy it while working. They were trained to postpone, to delay, to survive. And when the time finally comes to live, they're still following someone else's plan. Because freedom isn't found in what you can buy after 65. It's found in the courage to ask yourself, what if I stop believing the lie altogether? But maybe the biggest lie wasn't just the promise of retirement. Maybe it came much earlier, the training. Because from the moment you were young enough to understand the world, you were taught to wait, to postpone joy, to delay life. First it was, when I graduate, then when I get the job, then when I get promoted, when I pay off the house, when I retire, then I'll be happy, then I'll feel free, then I'll really start to live. But that then never comes, because you've been conditioned to chase it like a mirage on the horizon, always fading as you think you're getting close. Your mind has been trained not to experience the present, but to constantly project into a future that doesn't exist. And this isn't just a metaphor. Behavioral psychology has a name for it: delayed discounting, the tendency to undervalue the present in favor of imagined future rewards. The more you delay gratification, the more you train your mind to believe that now is never enough, that life is always somewhere else, and so you live your days in a kind of suspended animation, checking boxes, meeting deadlines, saving for later. You become an expert at surviving, not at being present. You know how to budget, how to organize, how to optimize, but you don't know how to pause, how to feel deeply, how to listen to that quiet voice inside you. By the time you reach retirement, you no longer know how to live. You only know how to wait. And the tragedy is, you think that's normal. But it's not life you've been preparing for. It's death in slow motion. A postponed life becomes an unlived life. You've been so busy measuring your worth by how productive, how successful, how secure you are, that you've forgotten how to simply exist. And when the structure disappears, when the job ends, when the roles dissolve, what's left is the terrifying realization that you never actually arrived. You were always on your way to something else. Alan Watts saw this trap decades ago. He warned us, stop measuring your life, live it. But that message is hard to hear in a society that rewards planning and punishes presence. We're told that productivity is virtue, that effort is meaning, that slowing down is weakness. So we internalize the belief that rest must be earned, that joy is a luxury, that being fully alive is conditional, and before we realize it, our entire existence becomes a rehearsal, a long, anxious preparation for a performance that never begins. But here's the truth. There is no grand finale, no perfect moment, no final destination where everything makes sense and nothing hurts. Life is happening now, in the chaos, in the silence, in the uncertainty, in the breath you just took. And if you can't touch it now, you won't touch it later, because later is just another word for never. When you've been taught to delay everything, the system doesn't just steal your time, it steals your presence. It convinces you that living is something you do after you've earned it. But you don't need to earn your existence. You never did. You don't need permission to feel joy. You don't need a reason to be fully alive. So the question is no longer, when will you start living? The real question is, will you ever stop waiting? So what do we do with all of this? After stripping away the myths, the roles, the scripts, what's left? Just this, a choice. Because true freedom isn't something you wait for. It's not something handed to you after decades of loyalty to a system. And it's certainly not something you buy with a pension plan. True freedom is a capacity, not a condition. It's not about having more time. It's about having the power to be fully alive in the time you already have. Freedom is presence. It's the ability to meet life as it is. Not as you wish it were, not as you planned it, not as they told you it should look. And the wildest part of all is, you don't need to retire to find it. You can begin right now, inside the very system that tried to take it from you. You can retire from the mindset before you ever retire from the job. That begins by redefining who you are, not by what you do, not by the role you play, but by what you value, by what lights you up inside, by what feels real when everything else goes quiet. Maybe you've spent decades being an engineer, a manager, a provider. But underneath it all, you've always been something deeper, a creator, a seeker, a soul. So build your life from that center. Create a new calendar, one that honors more than just deadlines and obligations. Make space for intentional silence, time where there's nothing to fix, nothing to finish, nothing to improve, time to simply be. That space is where freedom begins, not in doing more, but in doing less, with more intention. And when it comes to connection, shift your focus. Don't chase experiences just to check boxes or collect memories like souvenirs. Choose depth over novelty. Choose people who see you, not just the roles you perform. Choose conversations that move you, not just moments that distract you, because underneath all the planning and purchases, what we truly long for is presence. Presence with others, that's where meaning lives. Alan Watts once said, "This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with the here and now." That's not just philosophy, it's a survival skill. In a world that constantly drags you toward later, toward someday, toward what's next, your ability to return to now is an act of rebellion. And maybe that's the most powerful retirement of all, retiring from the trance, from the endless striving, from the belief that life is always just a few steps away. You don't need to wait until 65. You don't need the perfect plan. You don't need to have it all figured out. What you need is the courage to stop, to breathe, to ask yourself, what would it truly mean to live today?